Hello and welcome to the second episode of Hamro Tech Tips. And in this episode, we are going to discuss about Composer and what is Composer, why it is used, what are its benefits, and why the developer, PHP developer, on this day and age should strictly be using Composer to manage the dependencies. So, so before we start discussing about Composer, let's discuss what's dependency management, because Composer is basically a dependency manager, and every modern programming languages has a dependency management. PHP back in the days didn't used to have, and we used to struggle with managing the dependencies, and it was a big downside for PHP in general as a programming language. So if we need to talk about dependency management, let's understand, any projects would not exist in isolation. So let's say you create a couple of classes for your projects to work. So your project is dependent on those classes for it to function. So that dependency is what you built on your own. But then let's say you want to write a write a function, but then is using third-party packages or modules on your projects. So that's another external dependencies that you'll be using on your project. So no project is isolated or standalone on its own. You got to use different packages, different modules for your projects to work, because of the fact that you are not supposed to reinvent the wheel if it is already there. So that's the entire concept about this whole dependency management, about you are reusing the packages or portion of the features that has already been done, and you write on top of that to get your logic out there and make it work. That way your entire process of building the project would be quicker. So it saves you a lot of hassle and helps you to finish the project faster. So that's how what the dependency management is. So dependency management actually basically is a process of managing all your internal and external dependencies, upgrading them, updating them, removing them, and that sort of stuff, and basically helps you to get a project done faster. So that's what dependency management is. And we previously said, PHP's dependency management is Composer. So Composer is not to be mistaken as Yum or apt on a Linux, which is strictly a package manager. But Composer is more of a package manager, but it is more of a per project basis. So in that context, is more like Nodes npm or Ruby's bundler, and PHP 5.3.2 or onwards is required to run a Composer. So that's basically a brief summary about what Composer is. And if we need to talk about how Composer works, it maintains a simple JSON file known as composer.json on your project's root directory, which has different nodes. For instance, the required nodes have all the package's name and its version details that your Composer requires as the dependencies, and have other nodes like name, description, and that sort of stuff, which tells you more about what the project is and who's the author and that sort of details. So to install a dependency, you do Composer install and package's name, or if you are into already built projects but just want to install the dependencies as a deployment process, you just import the files or transfer the files and do Composer install to install all the packages that's mentioned in composer.json file. And basically when you are writing codes, Composer also autoloads all the dependencies, so you're not required to manually include all the files that you require. So Composer generally, once you do the setup, it generates the autoload file, and you once you require the autoload file on your projects, it would automatically make all the packages that you require, that you make it require on a composer.json file would basically be available for you to use. So you're not like so required to include all those files. So that would save you lot of management. So that's one of the another benefits uh, of using Composer. And basically packages.org is a is a website where you can know and search about the various packages available for Composer. So so like we briefly touched base on about autoload on a previous slide. So basically autoload would allow you to include the file without require or include on the programming. So it is very powerful and neat feature, and one of the key reason why you would be using such dependency management. So basically, autoload nowadays on a modern versions of PHP is PSR4 compliant. So they are basically standards for various functions you perform. So there are different types of autoloading methods. Basically 4 to be specific. So we have class map, PSR4, PSR0, and files. So class map would be you would be manually declaring about what classes you would be autoloading. So basically you require a key value pair of your classes. PSR0 is basically old PSR convention for autoloading your classes, which is replaced by PSR4 now. And files is PSR 0, PSR4, class map. They are all basically a classes, PHP classes autoloading, but files would be autoloading of files no matter whether it's a classes or not. So let's say your projects have a helper file which includes like bunch of simple mini functions, and you would need them throughout the project. So you could easily like declare that on a files for the autoloading property of Composer.json, and that would be available for you throughout the projects without the need to like include them manually. So autoloading is like shown here, would be again like done on Composer.json file. So some of the very quick but useful commands for running Composer would be composer require and the vendor name / package name. So this would be generally convention about how you name your Composer packages. Composer.show would show all the available Composer packages you can install. Composer outdated, Composer update. So these are all the tools or commands that you can use. Not all, but the key ones that you would frequently use on a project. So for instance, if you need to install a project, you do composer install, and then define a vendor name and package name, or basically a package name. If you want to uninstall a package, you do composer remove and the package name. If you need to once you have finished composing a Composer.json file, you do composer dump autoload. So that would generally create an autoload file that you could include in a project. So these are some of the key commands. We will basically use those like in our practical session as well. So but then this would be good to like keep it memorized to use the Composer while you're working with the projects. So now let's do a quick projects to all practically see everything we have discussed here. So basically let's do a small we designed a project. So let's do a small a document crawler to fetch a news from any given website. In this case, let's use WashingtonPost.com, and try to like fetch all the headlines for the on the homepage of WashingtonPost.com and display on a list. So for that, we would use we set up a dependency on for Symfony's DOM crawler and CSS selector. So these are the third-party packages we will use in our composer and auto-load them, and also we write our own class and auto-load them with PSR4 convention, and then basically use that to show the list of like headlines on WashingtonPost.com on our project. So this would be our. So I have a folder called practice that has a virtual host set up for test.local, and let's create a folder here for our practice projects called composer, and let's open up a Visual Studio Code. So this is what I use as a IDE. So in here, let's create text.php and code hello world. So that's what we set up, and composer, this is where we access. This is where you access a file. So nothing fancy going on right now. So let's set up a composer here. So basically, to set up a composer, I'll be using a integrated terminal here from now on. So to get started with the composer, basically we had a bunch of like a small sneak peek about like various commands. So we'll be using these commands. So basically, composer init is one of the first function that you would initiate to start a composer project. So composer init, and let's say it would generate a config name for you. So this would be a project name for you. Let's go with the details here. Basically, you would mention all your details here while you are writing for a project. So once you do that and accept all the default values, so basically you would write your author name, your description, your project license. If there are any dependencies, you could also go ahead and do it, search the package from here, but basically we'll do it on a stepwise basis. But I just wanted to show you, like, this is a composer JSON file that this command created for us. So it has just for now just name and empty required node. So this is just a JSON file that has all the instructions about our projects as of now. So so once as we have discussed on what our projects would be, basically we would be requiring to get all the headlines from the WashingtonPost.com. So to achieve that, what we have planned is we'll be using Symfony components. So Symfony has bunch of very neat, if you go to Symfony website and look for the components, it has various bunch of cool components for you to use. So they have like dependency management, error handler, and many other projects which you can use on your projects for easier and quicker implementation of various features. So in this context, we'd be using our DOM crawler, so it would helps us to navigate the DOM quicker for us, and CSS selector. So CSS selector would work in conjunction with DOM crawler, sorry. But then it would helps us to easily, like if you go to its documentation and see, it would easily helps us to map the XPath of the various CSS like selector. So it works in conjunction with DOM crawler for us to select different DOM elements. So the idea would be to inspect what different CSS classes that Washington Post is using, and grab it via the CSS selector from the DOM that we get from the URLs. So that would be the idea. So for installation, if you look at the documentation, you are required to run composer require Symfony DOM crawler. So this is the name of the package. Require is a composer, require is a composer command to install the package. So let's grab it and install it on our projects. Composer require Symfony DOM crawler, and another would be to get CSS selector. So again, we'll be using, so let's wait for this to complete, and would be composer requires Symfony CSS selector. So these are two of the dependencies from the Symfony component that we're using. So now if you go to composer, the JSON file, you would see the required attributes is updated, and you have the two packages listed here. So now our project knows that we have these two dependencies that we are using for our projects. So apart from that, now basically what you need to do is to include these to start using this dependencies. How you do is composer dump autoload. So the dump autoload would actually it would read the composer the JSON file and create a autoload.php file for you on a vendor folder. So the vendor folder was created from a composer where you have all the dependencies listed out here, faced from the command line for you, ready to use. So you don't need to manually worry about where to include that or what to use. Basically you just include this autoload.php file on your projects, and you'd be able to use all of those dependencies that you have on your project. So basically what you do is include let's say include once directory, and it's inside a vendor folder, and autoload.php. So this is basically what lets you set up autoload. So this is just one line where you include the autoload.php from the composer directory, and you would be able to use the packages. For instance, CSS selector. This is one of the packages we use. So you'd be able to use those packages on your projects now on, because you have already included them as autoload. So as a part of a project setup, this is one setup we have done for all our external dependencies. But then we also have a requirement where would be as a part of project planning, what you have done is we'd also include PSR4 autoload of our own CSS classes as well. So that's what we planned. So let's create a source directory, and in here let's have classes. So this is where, for instance, let's say news.php. So this is where this is our class, and let's say we want to have these also auto load as a part of our projects, because this would be our internal dependencies on our projects. We'll be using it from index.php because we don't want to mess this main entry point of our projects with all the codes, and want to go with object-oriented programming languages route instead. So if you are to use such features from Composer, where you would be loading your own dependencies as well, you would load that with PSR4 standard, and this is nothing than just another node where you define auto load, and you would write PSR4 convention where you would define where to look for this. So let's say I have a name of my crawler, and where do I look for? We'll look for source. So my crawler, this is the namespace for my projects. So all the classes would be inside the my crawler namespace. So if you're not sure about the namespace, I will make another video about that in the future as well. But basically, a namespace would be a very efficient way of organizing different classes. So let's say there are news classes for another like projects where you'd be including that as well. So that news would not conflict with our crawler news, where namespace would come in handy because it is my crawler's news, not any other package's news. So that's what basically gist of about namespace is, and where we look for the files would be on the source directory. So this is basically a very simple setup for setting up autoload for our custom classes for our projects. So once that's being done, what do we need to do? Let's define a crawler and news class. So in here, basically at the very beginning, you would have to define a namespace, and namespace would be whatever namespace you have as a root namespace, and this is inside a classes folder. So this is basically a namespace that you will apply for our projects. And now let's have a class news, and in here the idea would be to let's have a constructor here. So I'm sure you would know the details about what constructor and basically what the how object-oriented programming language works in general. So I don't bother to explain these in details over here, but obviously we would include those on our future sessions if that's required as well. So in here as a constructor, let's accept the argument where URL would be passed. So in here the idea would be to get the Washington Post URL here, and that would what we would use here to crawl the sites. So let's have some private variables here. So URL to crawl, let's do blank for now, and DOM would be also blank for now, and then crawler, and let's grab a headline. So this is what I intend to use on a project. So where I store the URL that I need to crawl, where I store DOM, that's a actual, like, you know, HTML content from the URL, and crawler would be a symphony components against that DOM, where you could grab different headlines there, and headlines would be the array where the crawler would basically return different headlines here, and we nicely, you know, implement this as an array in return for us to use. So that's the idea. Let's see, this can change obviously based on, like, you know, how it goes, but for now the idea is to work it with these variables. So right on the go, let's set this to URL, and DOM would be, let's use PHP, you know, get content this dot URL to crawl. So right off the bat, you know, we would have this DOM now has all the HTML for this to work. If we need to you know, see how this is working so far, let's return it, and now in here, and let's composer dump it first, and now let's use my crawler classes / news. So this is what we have. We are using a news, and now let's say news DOM would be new news, and what would be the argument would be the URL that we have done here. So let's see how so far it's working. So we have basically, we are passing a news arguments where the URL of the post, that URL of the site that we are trying to crawl, and on the news we are getting a HTML content of this and just returning. So nothing fancy as of now, but just, like, you know, checking in if we are in the right track so far. So it takes a while because it's actually crawling the site and extracting the DOM from the site. So basically this is what we have. So if you see the source, we have actual, you know, HTML from the page. So far it's looking good, but this is not what we need. We would basically need to we basically will need to be able to, you know, extract different like tags out here. So let's quickly go to their component documentation and see how we can use it. So basically, first of all, right off the bat, you need to you know, use the crawler component here, and basically you just create a crawler object for that, where you would be able to, you know, navigate through different DOMs. So as of now, let's assign new crawler, and this would have the DOM here. So that's what we have so far, and now let's not, like, you know, do everything in a constructor, but then let's create another function where to get headlines, right? And nothing fancy in here, no arguments as well. So what headlines would do is, like, you know, on this crawler object, we'll basically just filter all the headlines on a DOM element. So let's quickly go in here on the site and see they have basically applied headline classes to different headlines. So yeah, if we are able to, just grab the headlines and anchor tag to the headline, I think would be able to get all the headlines of the projects here. So what we'll basically do is, like, first of all, let's check we have crawler in here or not. So that would be the first thing. If not, then we'll just return false. Now if you have the crawler objects, basically for now let's headlines as a empty array for now. And now if we go to a documentation about the DOM crawler, you can basically use a filter method here, and hold on. So, and then you can also use an anonymous function where you can loop through different filter crawlers over here. So as of now, let me quickly grab this. So this would be the start crawler. We're not filtering P, but headlines A, and it would require a crawler object with nodes. So this is what it expects as an anonymous function. So so that would require us to get us all the headlines inside this function. So this is strictly based on the documentation that we have for this component over here. So let's not return, but let's say this dot headline would have an ID of, let's say, text would be node.text. So yeah, and at the end, once the loop is completed, we'll just return this to the return this. So basically what it is doing right now is just crawling the sites and then filtering the headlines A and looping through that and extracting all the text out of this. So in here, let's grab a headlines now, but it's again from a news DOM, and here what was the name of the get headlines. So get headlines. So let's now var dump the headline and see what we get. So yeah, it takes a while because you are going in the internet and getting back the result. So we don't have any result in here. Let me check what's wrong. Headline. Oh, I'm sorry. I think that's just singular over there. So let me refresh and see. So yeah, so you have all the headlines over here. So now I think that's pretty much what we want to do. Let's also grab the link for the news. So for that, again, if you need to see so yeah, we can grab a attribute with attr value. So let's use that, and we want href. So this would get us all the links and the text, let's say. So yeah, we are getting all the links and the text as well. So now let's quickly template this a little bit nicely. So we're not doing a real templates, but just something very basic so that we don't clutter this too much. So say news list .php, and this is where you do news list. To quickly, let's use Bootstrap here so that our list do not look very ugly. So something will not, we're just using HTML, CSS for this. So in here, let's use a container, and then hold on, I think Bootstrap has a list component over here. So yeah, this is what we are using in here. But here, let's say latest headlines. So that's what is being said. In here, let's simply include the template file. Use this. Of course, please don't do such kind of templating on your production project. So this is just for the sake of quickly showing you the result about how we can display these headlines, so we don't clutter this index.php file too much. So since we have include here and headline, we don't need to real templating engine pass down the context or the variables there, because since it is include, it would automatically be available here. So let's say if size of this is greater than 0, we'll actually be including this, so this doesn't produce any notice or warning if there's nothing in here. And on a headlines, we simply do for each headline as h. Let's get rid of this. So on a for each, basically what you need to do is echo h, and how was our array constructed? So link and text, right? So link would be h link, and text would be text in here. So that's what is being written and being used. So yeah, I think it should get us to a nice little list from Washington Post of all the latest headlines over here. So yeah, as you can see, we have all the headlines being crawled from the Washington Post website, where we had used different Symfony component. So if you are to click on the different headlines, you would be taken to that news articles. So this was a very quick, but I hope give you some context about how we were able to set up a composer, we're able to set up our own autoload and create our own classes where different dependencies into a Symfony component were implemented, and we're crawling the sites using various component or packages related functions. So basically this is a very quick and dirty way of showing how composer can be used on a project. So if I need to go back to to our slide again, what we can say is how this actually the entire thing worked is, when we did a composer init, it created a composer JSON file, and when we dumped the composer JSON file, it created a vendor and autoload.php file. So when we are including autoload.php file, it would automatically load all the vendor requires that we have, and also all the PSR for custom classes we have done for our own projects. So they all work in conjunction, and your index.php now has all of these available, so where you will be able to use all the functions and classes and get your projects done. You were able to use those packages and create the projects on your own on relatively short period of time. So yeah, this is how we use a composer, and I hope it helped you a bit to give you some idea about and context about how this whole thing works in together. If you have any questions, yeah, feel free to let me know, and I'll try to get back to you whenever that's possible. So yeah, thanks. Have a good day. Bye for now.